The letter arrived on a dreary Tuesday. Rain lashed against the windows. Inside, our protagonist, let's call them Oliver, sat by the fire. Oliver, an aspiring writer with more dreams than dollars, was not expecting much. Bills, probably. Instead, the heavy parchment announced the death of a relative he'd never met, Great Aunt Amelia. This wouldn't normally be cause for much excitement. Except, the letter continued, Oliver was now the sole heir to her vast estate. Oliver reread the letter. It was no joke. He was to leave immediately for the remote island where Great Aunt Amelia had lived a secluded life. The journey would be long. The journey would be arduous. But the promise of adventure, and perhaps a solution to his financial woes, spurred Oliver on. He packed a small bag, ignoring the unsettling feeling growing in his stomach. He had a feeling this inheritance was more than just a pile of old money. The taxi ride to the station was a blur of rain-streaked windows and the rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers. Oliver barely noticed. He was already lost in thought, picturing the grand estate he might inherit. Would it be a crumbling mansion? A cosy cottage? He boarded the train, his mind awash in possibilities, each more outlandish than the last. The train lurched forward, carrying Oliver towards the unknown and the mysteries that awaited him. The train journey was long and filled with strange characters. Oliver, however, was too preoccupied with his own thoughts to pay them much mind. He spent the hours staring out the window, watching the scenery change from bustling cityscapes to rolling countryside. As the train journeyed further north, the landscape grew wilder. Trees closed in on the tracks, their branches heavy with what looked suspiciously like ravens. The air, once filled with the sounds of civilization, was now eerily silent, save for the rhythmic clatter of the train wheels. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the train pulled into a small, deserted station. The station master, a man with a face like a wrinkled prune, pointed Oliver towards a lone figure waiting by a horse-drawn carriage. "Mr. Blackwood, I presume?" the figure asked, his voice a raspy whisper. Oliver nodded, feeling a shiver run down his spine. The journey to the estate was a blur of muddy roads and dark, imposing trees. The carriage driver spoke little, his silence only adding to the growing sense of unease. As they approached the estate, the trees finally parted, revealing a sight that made Oliver gasp. The mansion loomed before him, a Gothic masterpiece of dark stone and towering spires. It was both beautiful and unsettling, like a scene from one of his own Gothic stories. The mansion seemed to watch his every move, its windows like watchful eyes. The carriage rumbled over a bridge, crossing a moat filled with murky water. He was here at last. But as the carriage came to a halt before the imposing front doors, Oliver couldn't shake the feeling that he had stepped into a story he wasn't quite ready to read. The mansion's interior was even more intimidating than its exterior. Dust-covered portraits of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow Oliver's every move. Cobwebs clung to the high, vaulted ceilings, and the air was thick with the smell of decay and old secrets. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the echoing click of Oliver's shoes on the marble floor. He wandered through dimly lit corridors, his hand trailing along the cold stone walls. Each room seemed to be frozen in time. A grand dining room with a table set for 20, the silverware still gleaming despite years of neglect. A library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the volumes within holding who knew what forgotten knowledge. A music room with a dusty grand piano, its keys silent for who knows how long. And everywhere the same sense of watchful eyes, of secrets whispered in the shadows. Oliver couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that the house itself was studying him. He found himself drawn to a large, ornate door at the end of one of the corridors. It was made of dark wood, intricately carved with strange symbols and creatures that seemed to writhe and twist before his eyes. Oliver reached out a hesitant hand and pushed the door open. It creaked ominously, as if warning him back. He stepped inside and gasped. The room was unlike any Oliver had ever seen. It was a museum of the strange and the wonderful, filled with artifacts from around the world. Glass cases displayed shrunken heads and ancient scrolls. Animal hides, their eyes replaced with glittering jewels, hung limply on the walls. There were suits of armor made from the scales of some unknown reptile, and weapons that seemed to hum with a power that sent shivers down Oliver's spine. In the center of the room, bathed in the pale light filtering through a stained glass window, stood a pedestal. On it rested a single object, a wooden box, no bigger than a book, covered in intricate carvings. The carvings were unlike any Oliver had ever seen, a strange mix of symbols and creatures that seemed to writhe and shift as he watched. He found himself drawn to the box, his fingers itching to open it, to discover the secrets it held. But something held him back. He couldn't shake the feeling that the box was dangerous, that it held a power that could be as destructive as it was alluring. He stepped back from the pedestal, his heart pounding in his chest. This room, this house, was filled with wonders, but also with an undercurrent of danger that he couldn't ignore. He had a feeling that this inheritance was more than just a grand estate. It was a mystery waiting to be unraveled.